So here we are again on a Monday night, ready to talk about the last of our cryptids. This is the Fallout Lorecast. Welcome. I'm your host, Tom or Robots, and I am here as usual on Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, twitch.tv/robotsradio with my very special co-host, Lainey, who's wearing cat ears.
Hello.
Hi, Lainey.
I am wearing cat ears.
Lainey's got all this awesome gear. She's like this big popular streamer now. She's got cool gear. She's got like a mechanical keyboard and a glow up mouse and cat ear headphones.
These glow too, but I can't figure out how to make it work.
You'll get there. You'll get there one of these days. Holy crap. Well, you're just like blowing people away with your Twitch popularity. You are like Twitch streamer of the week, I hear. That was a thing. Somebody awarded you somewhere, probably. It's time for alcohol somewhere around the world. Isn't that a thing that people say? So anyway, we're back today. We are talking about the last of our cryptids. We've gone through a bunch of the cryptids that show up in the Fallout games, most of which show up in Fallout 76. And this week, we're discussing the Wendigo. The Wendigo. In Fallout 76, there's also a Wendigo Colossus, but we're talking about the Wendigo because the Wendigo Colossus is kind of a extension on that. And there's some controversy that we wanted to cover ahead of getting into the nitty gritty details. Lainey, what's the deal with the controversy around the Wendigo? How does that work?
So it essentially boils down to cultural appropriation, which if you don't know what the real definition for that is, because it kind of gets tossed around recently, and sometimes for very good reason, but lots of people don't know what it actually means. So cultural appropriation is when people outside of a culture that's usually a minority culture, or, it tends to be white people taking other people's things, unfortunately.
Yeah, traditionally. Well, traditionally, and you look back through, say, the 20th century and the writing of books or the creation of movies. And often that has been done from the white American culture taking on other cultures. And a simple representation of this would be like cowboys and Indians, right? Like that's not even the right name for who they are. They're indigenous peoples and they all have different names because there's lots of different cultures. And the way that those old movies, say in the 1950s, would display that, they would show the white folk as the cowboys, and that would be more or less accurate to the way history was. And then you would have the cultural appropriation of the Indian culture among those people, and even the misrepresentation of the culture, all of the stuff that goes on with that. So it's kind of an overly simplified version of that. But the appropriation part is when you go, okay, well, now we're going to start wearing feathers like the Native American people do, and then you appropriate it even though you aren't actually doing it in the way that was originally intended or with respect to the culture. You're just kind of taking it from them.
Right. It usually has to do with a deep misunderstanding of what they're doing, and people do it a lot of the times completely unintentionally, which is why it can be hard to talk about, because people will do it not realizing that they're doing something that's harmful. So with Fallout, for example, completely
misrepresenting what the original thing was in general at all.
Right.
Oftentimes they don't even do it in the right context. Like the example of, wearing feathers in your hair or something like that. That it may not even have been done by the tribe that you're even referencing. Or there's a lot of complexity to it. But it can get. And a lot of the time,
it can be okay to draw from these other sources, right? At the end of the day, we're all human. You want to share those things and appreciate them. But the key to doing it right is knowing where they come from. And because things end up kind of whitewashed and misrepresented, people don't ever get to learn where they began. And so you end up learning about things like voodoo, for example, in Hollywood, which has been blown out of proportion as this scary thing, when in actuality it's an African religion, right?
Right.
So you see this in lots of contexts,
and it's very much misrepresented, and it's done through the eyes of people who misunderstood what it was initially anyway, and then it's of course layers upon layers of misrepresentation. Like people are referencing previous misrepresentations before they even get back to what the core of it actually is. And the cowboy thing could be exactly the same kind of thing here. And Fev in chat even says that 70% of cowboys were actually minorities, which I don't know if that's a statistically legitimate fact, but if it is, then again, that's a misrepresentation of a culture. So these are all things that are good to be aware of as we move forward with our understanding of human beings and respecting human beings and people's cultures and where they come from, how does this apply to something like the Wendigo?
So the Wendigo actually, unlike a lot of the other Fallout 76 cryptids, which you can find, started in the United States area of North America, a lot of them more recently. So they're legends that came around in the last 100 years or so, a lot of them. This goes back quite a bit further and is still believed in even today, which is why it's a little weird to repurpose it in a way that's not the original intention, is because it's still relevant. It comes from the beliefs of Algonquin speaking. That's a language. It's a language shared by multiple First Nation tribes, which are like Native Americans, right? But in like the Canada region. Mm-hmm. And there's a handful of tribes that fall under this umbrella. And they all have different kind of understandings of what a Wendigo is, but it's shared throughout them, this idea of a Wendigo. And pretty much from all of them, it's agreed to be cannibalistic and supernatural, and basically runs on greed and selfishness.
Right. And let me jump in here, too. All of this information is done based on our research and mostly Lainey's research. So if there's anything that we get wrong or wrong-ish, then please understand that we're not claiming. I'm not saying you're getting this stuff wrong, Lainey, but I always want to put the information out there that we are open to correction. If there's something that we are, truthish about, but not fully there, then please let us know. And especially if you come from one of these cultures where you can shed a light on something in a way that maybe our sources were incorrect on, then that's awesome. We can address that in a future episode and say, this is actually the truth of this situation, or this is what somebody informs us about, and we may have been incorrect with this. Continuing that conversation with humility is part of what makes learning things about all these different cultures and information in general good. I mean, it's part of the scientific process, is being able to look at something and say, I wasn't 100% correct about that. I have more information now. Here's what I now know. So tell you what, let's do our little vault sound, and then we're going to get into the nitty gritty details about Wendigos historically. All right, so we were jumping into this. We were saying, okay, originally in most representations of this, Wendigos are cannibalistic and supernatural. So how does that work?
So there's a few interpretations even underneath that. Some people believe that it was just a malevolent spirit, while others believed it was something that humans who either succumbed to things like cannibalism or just insurmountable greed would become because their souls were weak and the malevolent spirit that others would perceive as a Wendigo would overtake it. So a human could corruption, become the Wendigo.
Right, like their spirits were corrupted by their selfish nature.
Right. Yeah, they become a physical embodiment of what it was considered to be wrong with their mind.
Okay.
And so in some cases you have this idea of possession, whereas in others it's really just a supernatural entity. But in either case, it's something that these people consider to be real, and that is a genuine threat or a perceived threat that they might encounter or that someone might turn into.
Yeah, it's kind of similar in some ways to belief in Western society of ghosts.
Yeah.
Something like 40% of the population actually believes in ghosts. Like this is part of our cultural identity. This is part of our it's not specific to a religion. It's just a concept about something supernatural that many of us hold, and many different people describe it in slightly different ways. Maybe it's the spirit of somebody who passed away who had something left undone, something unfinished, and they refused to leave. Maybe it was somebody who was killed in a very tragic sense and tragic way, and so they're angry, and so their spirit remains, and they haunt a thing. There's a lot of different representations of that throughout multiple cultures, but very much in Western culture, and we can speak for American culture because that's where we're from. But yeah, if you look at statistics on this, it's something like 40% plus of Americans actually believe in ghosts, which is kind of crazy. I'm not going to say crazy because that's a derogatory term. It's kind of unexpected from my perspective on it, because I come at these things from a very skeptical standpoint, but that's the way our culture handles it. And this seems very similar in that it's something that people from this culture kind of hold on to, and there's different explanations for how this actually works, and it tends to be supernatural. So what else is going on with this?
So there's been some efforts to explain it scientifically, of course, in the same way people try to explain ghosts or other supernatural phenomena. You want to be able to give a reason as to if it is real, how it could be. But the attempts to do this have actually been in some ways more harmful and even more misinformed than actually genuinely scientific, where there are some psychologists who believe in the concept of Wendigo psychosis, which essentially is a label. You can kind of put it on any situation where a cultural fear of something ends up leading to the people succumbing to those things, which in theory sounds possible, right? It sounds like something that could happen. You know, if you're in a situation where you're obsessing over possibly becoming something that becomes your life, you know, you could spiral in that way. Right.
It is also it's also kind of connected to this idea that the kinds of psychoses that we suffer are often very much tied to our own belief systems. So therefore, somebody who might be of a Catholic background might believe in something like demonic possession. And so when they fall into some sort of psychological issue, oftentimes they describe that as demonic possession. Whereas somebody who isn't from that background, who might believe in something like aliens, may describe it as, I was visited by aliens. They've taken over my mind, you know, or ghosts or something like that. It's oftentimes the thing that we believe in as humans is very much directly tied to the way it is represented in our psychological analysis.
Right. So, you know, in all of that, on the base surface level, this explanation seems like it could make sense, right? It correlates the thing that they're afraid of with the thing that they might turn to when they are suffering from an intense mental illness, right? Trying to come up with a solution. Or just understand what is happening. The problem is that this label has been created from outside of the culture, not within it, and it lacks an understanding of the people within it and what is actually going on, and has done some more harm than good. And at first, when I read it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. You know, I'm incredibly interested in psychology and I wanted to know more. But when I first started looking into actual cases that people have done reports on of this happening, it started to kind of fall apart. So one of the most famous examples of this is really similar to the Donner Party, and I saw someone in chat reference that maybe that's been chalked up to being a cannibal thing, and this is a really similar story. So there was a family from one of the tribes that was winter of what year? 1878, and they were starving, and it was a father and his wife and a group of children, right? And eventually they died, and the oldest son was the last to die, and the father was alone. And decided that, you know, they all starved to death in the cold, he needed to survive, and he ate his family, which is very dark, right? And it's really easy to associate this with this idea of Wendigo psychosis for a couple of reasons. The first one, of course, being that these people would have a relation to the concept of the Wendigo. The second being a suggested idea that they knew that food was nearby and he could have went in to get it, which on paper seemed okay at first, except when I started reading the facts, it doesn't make any sense. First off, these people starved to death. If they knew where food was and they could get to it, they probably would have. Right. And secondly, the place that they reported the food to be was still another 25 miles away. And he was alone in the winter, starving.
Yeah. 25 miles trudging through snow-filled passes of mountains. Like, that is no small feat, especially when you're already starving, because the amount of energy that takes. I mean, to try to do that just in a regular condition, and that's difficult. Yeah, I can't imagine that would be easy to do.
So that's the issue with a lot of these cases, is that when you look at the facts of them, there are very logical explanations to what happened in them. Or, so they're either just like equally as far-fetched where like people tied things together that don't make any sense, or they really are just normal murder cases. One of the ones I came upon didn't even have anything to do with cannibalism. It was literally just like some people killed each other, and they were like, oh, must be the Wendigo psychosis, because they're just going to slap the label on it, which doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So that's not good.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems like misdiagnosis.
Yeah. And so how this relates again to the cultural appropriation and all of those things is just that it casts a negative bias on a whole culture, because it makes it seem like these people are more likely to fall victim to this kind of insanity where like, oh no, like something bad might happen and they might eat each other, which is just not fair at all. No,
it's not. Yeah, especially when a culture isn't known for very many things. People will latch on to the one thing they know about it and then use that to broad brush the entire culture, or entire people group. We are, as human beings, we tend to be very prone to describing anybody on the out group, so anyone who we define as other, as being other and also negative because of X or Y. So we have to be very careful with that.
Right. So that's the end of the context, essentially, on that note. That's pretty much it. Okay. You really can't, like, you just gotta be careful with what you're doing. You gotta try to understand the people that you're learning from first. Right. But that's all.
Well, let's move into some of the details. Traditionally, what are Wendigos described as among this culture?
Yeah, so this is kind of across the board. Even if you look at the media that has come up, this has remained pretty much the same. And the same goes for whether it's just a supernatural creature or something that a human turns into. It's pretty consistent, appearance-wise. So you see someone who is a humanoid creature, looks incredibly gaunt. Their skin is very tight over their bones. Their bones seem to stick out because of this. They're very thin. Their eyes might be sunken in. Usually like a pale gray dead complexion,
like somebody who's starving and willing to eat humans in order to stay alive. Right.
There are, in some, I can't speak for every single, what everyone believes a Wendigo is like. I'm just kind of pulling together, the pieces. Right. So there are some people who believe that Wendigos are actually much, much larger than humans, because when they consume humans, and when they do, they actually grow in size relative to what they consume, which means that they're never satiated, because they always need more, because they're always getting larger. Like a goldfish stuck in a pond that keeps getting moved to bigger ponds. Yeah, yeah.
Wendigo. Ta-da! It's the goldfish of cryptids.
The goldfish of cryptids. Okay. Oh man!
All right. So what else? What else do we know about them?
They got long, spindly fingers, which is my least favorite thing when it comes to these supernatural creatures. That's oof. You guys know, like, ghost videos and stuff, and people are like, "It's a rake," and the spindly hands and limbs. I don't like that at all.
Like salad fingers. That's a callback. That's a callback. Oh, my belly basket. I used to be able to do a good salad fingers. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Marjorie Stewart Baxter. I don't think that's even the right name. Okay, so spindly long fingers. That's creepy. Yeah. There's something that's just naturally unsettling about really long fingers. Got it?
Right. Their body looks like it was human and has just really just dealt with starvation for a long time, and things are a little exaggerated, because it's spooky. It's not supposed to be like easy on the eyes.
Right.
You have to imagine this in the same way as like Santa Claus. Like, if you're bad, Santa Claus is going to bring you coal. It's like, oh, if you are selfish, you're going to turn into a Wendigo. It's like, it's like a scary bedtime story. They tell your kids to like make them behave.
Yeah, it's going to be scary.
I don't know if they use it like that, but in my head, it fulfills the same cultural need.
Yeah. Don't eat your friends, or you might get really long fingers.
Oh,
Don't do it. Don't do it.
So yeah, so it's like what a person would not ever want to be, right? It's like this sickly, strange looking person. It's really quite simple.
Yeah.
In terms of Fallout, and I'm not going to go into like details of like where they came from or anything real quick. We'll get to that after the
break. Yeah.
But just in terms of how they behave, you'll usually find them like in groups, or you'll find them near or around feral ghouls, which we'll get into in a little bit why that might be, because there's some speculation about it all.
Okay.
But it's fun. So we can end this here.
Cool. Yeah, so that's kind of the historical context of the Wendigo and the cultural context of the Wendigo. All right, well, let's move into the middle of the show, and then we're going to come back and talk about how this actually plays out in the Fallout games. So here we go.
Hello there, old chap. Good to see another of General Atomic's finest, still eager to serve.
So this is the part of the show where we absolutely have to thank our patrons, our wonderful, wonderful patrons who support the show month after month. And I've got some good news for you guys, because normally, and since we've been doing these as live streams, we stick around after the show. You guys have probably heard me talk about stay for after the show. We'll have some office hours. I'll answer some questions for you. And a lot of times that turns into questions about Fallout, questions about things that were discussed during the episode, or also things like podcasting or creating videos or marketing your show and those kinds of things. So because we've been doing that after the shows, I decided, you know what? I recorded anyway. Why don't I add it on for the patrons? So guess what? If you're already a patron, or if you would like to be a patron, all of our patrons will now have access to the full extended versions of the shows. So if you're listening to this episode right now on Patreon, then make sure you stay tuned after the credits at the end, after the you've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast, or whatever happens at the end, because you're probably going to get another 15-20 minutes of show and questions that people have been asking live in our chat room. And of course, if you'd like to be here live for our episodes, then join us on Monday nights, twitch.tv/robotsradio, and you can ask the questions yourself. So lots of new stuff for people just to say thank you from us to you. I always like to give as much as I possibly can. And if you're interested in joining us and becoming one of our patrons, patreon.com/FalloutLorecast is the place to do it. There's links in the show notes. So thank you again to all of our patrons. You guys are amazing. All right, let's move on to the rest of the show. This show is brought to you by our patrons. Patreon.com/ElderScrolls.
I'd be delighted to answer them.
The skies are marked with numberless sparks, each a fire, and every one a sign.
The whole stream just blew up because I hit the wrong button, and then Lainey disappeared and came back. All right, we're back. I'm going to leave that in because it's hilarious. All right, Lainey. So what's the deal with the Wendigos in game? What kind of information did you dig up? First of all, wait. First of all, we've been talking about Fallout 76. I know you've been playing a lot of different games on stream. A lot of these cryptids you haven't come across yet in game.
Yeah.
You probably haven't seen one of these guys yet either, have you?
No.
Oh,
maybe for
man.
the better.
Oh, man. They're good.
Apparently they're fast.
They're fast. They're like, okay, imagine a ghoul, right? You got like a feral ghoul, right? Kind of mostly human shaped, kind of droopy skin, you know, like kind of peeling off. You know, their clothes are going in tatters. All right, now imagine you took that and you fused it with Gollum from the Lord of the Rings, right? Gave him like a little pot belly, kind of a more bulbous head, extended the arms out a little bit and made them like the hands all creepy and long. And they kind of move like this. And I'm flailing my arms around. This is really good audio for everybody. And I feel like they're greenish, but maybe that's just the lighting in the different places where I've seen them most recently. They're fast, they hit you hard, and they're super creepy. Super creepy. Those are just the regular, regular Wendigos. The Wendigo Colossuses are even more magnificent creations. Have you seen them? Have you seen pictures of them?
No. Pictures.
Pictures, yeah. Where they look like there's like 3 heads. There's like the little itty bitty feet that hang down, and then the long arms that they use as legs to walk.
Yeah.
It's bad. Earl's one of them. Yeah, we need to go fight Earl one of these days.
In the the game, I have the little plushie, and it's on my camp.
You have a little Wendigo plushie in your camp?
If you, like, activate it, it makes a little Wendigo noise.
Yeah.
I think it's really cute, but I showed it to CJ. I was like, look how cute it is, and it made, like, a grrr noise, and CJ was like, cute.
Oh, nice. Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, these guys are great. So what have you come across in your research about them?
Okay, so, I mean, simply put, they have different forms. You can encounter scorched version, you can encounter, whatever version, just like all the other cryptids. But they also have the Colossus form, which is a whole lot of hoopla, if you ask me.
A whole lot of hoopla. Yeah, like combined body parts in this wonderful amalgamation of this towering creature. Yes, it is. Yeah. It's body horror, basically.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's body horror the monster. Insane. Yeah.
Body horror the monster.
Yeah.
But in terms of lore, there's not a whole lot, but there's some things we can speculate about, and there is one story that is canonically linked to them. So let's dive in.
Yeah,
but I'll ask you, do you want to do the speculation first, or do you want to do the
speculation about the connection between the Wendigos and the
feral ghouls
and the feral ghouls?
Or do you want to do the mostly confirmed backstory first?
Well, I can speculate because I have some thoughts on that. Okay. Because I like speculating. I like trying to guess at what the writers are doing in movies and games and see if I'm accurate once we actually get the reveal. But then definitely we'll get into the more confirmed stuff. So,
okay.
Speculation. You got cannibalism, right? Feral ghouls. Feral ghouls we know are basically cannibals, right? They're humans who have mutated due to the FEV and radiation, and they've kind of not only changed their appearance to look more like zombies, but they're also kind of lost their minds, whereas some of them maintain their minds and end up living very long, but they also gain resistance to radiation. So, feral ghouls attack humans. They are violent. They might actually eat them. Although, do we see feral ghouls eating people? I'm trying to think.
Do they eat anything?
Do they eat anything? Because here's where I'm going with this. If feral ghouls...
Can they digest things?
Yeah, because ghouls can digest things. They must eat. But ghouls don't necessarily, like the non-feral ghouls, the sane ghouls, the people who just have been ghoulified, it seems to be confirmed in the lore that they don't necessarily need to eat, but they can. That there are instances in the lore, and I covered this on one of the previous episodes, where they, one was locked in a refrigerator for what seemed like decades, and somebody opened the refrigerator door, and out comes the ghoul, and he's still there. Probably insane, but still alive. So if they eat people, or they eat each other, then maybe that leads toward continuing their strange mutation into something that becomes more and more horrible, and therefore they turn into something that looks more like the Wendigo. They do physically have similarities in appearance, and I think that was the thing that was most striking to me when I first came across Wendigos in game, is that there's that same kind of humanoid but no longer human appearance. They look like, the Wendigos in game look like they came from people that were then changed into something, rather than, say, like the sheep squatch doesn't look like a person. It looks like a sheep that happens to walk on its back legs and is like this hulking monstrosity. It doesn't look like it evolved out of a person. Does that make sense? It just happens to have features that are humanoid, whereas something like Wendigo seems to have been a person that was changed into something that is now further away from a person, rather than a sheep that is changed into something that is closer to the shape of a person. It's the opposite direction. So I think that would be my speculation on it. What do you think?
That's interesting speculation. I, of course, having done research, have already encountered other people's thoughts. As far as we know, there is no correlation between ghouls becoming Wendigos or them actually being related, although people do think that they are because they're similar in appearance. They both don't really get any damage from radiation. They're resistant, stuff like that. So they are very similar. But I think this might have less to do with them actually being related and more to do with them both just coming from the same source, which is people and radiation. So, and this kind of ties into what the lore that we do know is. So we can get there in a second. But yeah, it is really interesting that people have come to think that they are similar, and there is even more to kind of lead to that, because you do encounter them not fighting each other. They'll just be near each other, and they won't.
There is a specific place that you go in a quest to find a Wendigo in a cave. And pretty much the majority of the enemies that you come across you come across some other stuff too. Like there's some Mirelurks, I think, down there. But a lot of the enemies in that area are feral ghouls before you actually get to the Wendigo. So I think that's part of the connection to what I was thinking because when you see them at a distance, the humanoid shape, and then when they come running at you, it's very similar. The Wendigo looks different, but there's definitely a lot of times that you see, Wendigo Cave is what it's called. When you see them at a distance and you're not sure, okay, is that the, no, that's not, just another ghoul. Is that a Wendigo? No, that's another ghoul. And then you finally see one and go, okay, that's the Wendigo. Because they're similar enough that in a dark cave, you may not necessarily be sure which thing you're coming up on.
Yeah. And that's, that's a really interesting point. I also think that with the layout of like, you have to encounter all the ghouls before you can have the Wendigo, it can kind of prepare you to think like, oh, this is the ghoul of all ghouls. You can tie those things together pretty easily. So maybe those things are correlated. Maybe. We don't know. Here's what we do know is, so specifically in Wendigo Cave, that is where the Wendigo comes from. In the games, the Wendigo that you met, I don't know that it's the first one, but I do know that's where the first one was created. So there was a cannibalistic raider tribe called the Gourmands.
The Gourmands, yeah.
They no longer exist, not due to Wendigos, but just due to a combination of scorched and other wasteland factors, radiation, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
They just got kind of destroyed.
Difficulties with survival. Let's just say.
But they were cannibals, and they were pretty weird. They used to try to use human flesh as currency instead of caps.
Which is weird, because how do you define how much human flesh is worth what?
I mean, how do you define how many caps is worth what?
Each cap is
anything into currency.
Each cap is the same size. Are you like, okay, here's an ear. Okay, here's a square inch of flesh from a thigh. Are these equivalent? I don't know. I don't know.
But when you consider that they would eat them, maybe they did have a system.
It was maybe just weight.
They're like, this is how much. This is this amount of food.
Oh, just body weight. Just weigh the human meat and just be like, all right, gross. 3 pounds. All right, that's worth 3 pounds right there.
Yeah,
that means nasty. if you find and murder a fat person, like really big boy. Big boy's been eating lots of burgers. That person is worth way more than somebody. Well, I guess it makes sense because you have more to eat.
Yeah, well, I don't want to go into cannibalism facts, but actually a very athletic person would taste better than a very fat person.
Right, because they'd be less fatty. You'd have more lean meat on them. They would be in the 99% fat-free section of the grocery store as opposed to the 90% fat-free, whatever. Anyway,
so there's the Gourmands, and they're a cannibalistic raider tribe, and they don't exist anymore. But what we do know of them is a few creepy facts, and that they once had a leader who was banished, and he was banished to the Wendigo Cave
to live
he was
all on his own for the rest of his life as a hermit in safety, right?
In safety, except he's a cannibal.
What?
And he's like evil. He's part of a raider tribe. So what do these things mean? What do raiders like to do? They like to raid and pillage and take things and fight people.
They don't make their own stuff. They just take it from other people.
Right. So it sounds like he's pretty greedy and he likes to eat people. And now he's in a cave by himself for how long? In radiation? I wonder what will happen.
So here's the real question, chat. It's a chicken and egg question. Was the cave called the Wendigo Cave before he showed up, or was it called the Wendigo Cave after he turned into a Wendigo? Which was first, the chicken or the Wendigo egg? Or the Wendigo or the cave? Either way, it's a puzzle.
It's a puzzle.
It's a puzzle.
Quite puzzling.
All right. Well, so basically that's the idea then, right? He shows up, he goes to the cave.
He goes to the cave,
that's the Wendigo you come across.
And just fixated with his bloodlust.
Yeah.
And he becomes the first Wendigo. So it's thought that all of the other Wendigos somehow came from him, which is strange.
Like a vampire. He sired the other Wendigos.
But it doesn't seem like he's created them. Well, though, if this is true, you could make them more. Like, it's not like ghouls are procreating. So, like, Wendigos, you could just end up with more of them for more raiders, I guess.
I guess you could.
But also, when I hadn't thought about them happening naturally, and I was like, man, what if ghouls and Wendigos are, like, having babies? Like, this is where the
I don't think that happens because the body parts that they need to do that fall off pretty early in the whole body's deteriorating
that's occurred
thing.
To me now.
Yeah, that's so fun. I've mentioned this on a previous show about how, like, basically ghouls are zombies. Did I mention on this previous show? I do so many shows now, I don't even remember. But yeah, in the real world, like, every representation of zombies is wrong because they'd all be walking around with their pants around their ankles because they waste away. Like, unless they had suspenders, then the suspenders didn't slip off their shoulders. Zombies would all not have pants. No pants. No pants zombies. And I guess maybe Fallout's the first one to do it right, because often the ghouls are either just in tattered or just naked, right? They're just kind of like naked feral monsters, right?
Yeah, I don't know. They're like... you can't tell what's skin and what's clothes.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to tell. It's all just kind of mushed together. Yeah, the pants eventually could deteriorate, but like early zombie pandemic, you go a few weeks where their bodies start to waste away. The fat around their waists, unless they're really skinny with like a belt cinched around their bones, would deteriorate, and then the pants would just slide off over time, right? Just like, imagine wearing a loose pair of pants and just never pulling them up. How many steps would it take for them to just eventually fall off you? And then they'd be running around with them around their ankles. Yeah. So pantless.
Can you imagine playing like
Donald
The Last
Duck
of Us?
Yeah, we'll be dealing with a bunch of Donald Ducks.
Are naked.
Yeah, just running at you with their lower body parts just out, in the wind. So yeah, that's what we got here. But yeah, the ghouls often are naked, and the Wendigo is often naked as well, glowing in many cases, and yeah, and then there's
the big,
and
they're
larger,
so big because they eat so much,
and that might be part of it. And then there's the Colossus ones. Now, so here's the question: the Colossus ones. We're gonna have to dig into this in a future episode. Earl turns into a Colossus. There's a girl in the settlement who talks about her dad missing. That's Earl. There's a connection to it. But what caused him to become a Wendigo Colossus? Like, is there more to it than that? And why multiple heads? There's something going on there. So so in what I saw, it was just like more mutations, but multiple heads is a really weird thing because you would think that each head can function on its own. Do they each have their own brain? Right. Extra brains? Is it like a what are they in in World of Warcraft, the big ogres with the two heads? Like, is it like in Monty Python where the guy has the two heads, the knight with the two heads, and then they argue with each other? Who gets to decide what they do? I don't know. All right. Well, that's about as far as we can go with Wendigos and the Wendigo Colossi.
Unfortunately, there really isn't much else in there yet.
Yeah, not else. But, they could add more. This could be a thing to expand on. And
I think, so with Fallout, I don't think that they intended to do anything culturally insensitive. And in some ways, in terms of the origin story, they've played with what is considered to be how Wendigos are created. Is it a supernatural being? Not really, but that's because Fallout plays in the world of radiation and things. They had to pick one, right? They got to pick something. Right. And Fallout does play with ghosts and supernatural stuff, but it makes more sense to have a connection to, like, here's the storyline of a character who went through this terrible thing, decided to became very greedy, a cannibal, and therefore turned into a Wendigo. Like that. Right. That just lines right up. All that's to say, it is a little strange. So, like, they did a great job of all of that. But of course, there's no callback to where Wendigos originally come from, and it still is just like this awful person turned into this monster story.
Right. So I could see how
it's interesting to take a well-known creature. Like, all the other cryptids are very true to their roots, and the Wendigo isn't. You know, that's the issue. If there is one, that is where it is. And it's the same thing, just, you know, to wrap this all up, with other games that also do this, especially with Wendigos. There are other, Until Dawn does it. There's more. There's shows and things that include Wendigos in them. And most of the time they aren't done sensitively, you know, and I don't think that's on purpose. Of course, I think that they're doing what they can, and they just don't know better. Well,
like I mentioned before, oftentimes people will appropriate an idea from somebody else who already used that idea, not knowing that there's a history. I mean, how often do you do the full research behind a concept before you just use it as a fictional work?
Right.
You know, especially when it's lumped in.
I heard of this monster and I think it's really cool and creepy.
Right. Especially when it's lumped in with other monsters. You're like, oh, that's an American monster from some culture. That's another American monster from some culture. And okay, we'll just use them and we'll just kind of build on the lore that we already understand from popular culture without actually getting to the source. That makes sense. Also, corrected, the Monty Python Knight had 3 heads. You're right. There were 3 heads.
Like a Wendigo Colossus.
Like a Wendigo Colossus. Monty Python is Earl, the Wendigo Colossus. There you go.
Get the Red Spring out.
They need to get John Cleese to voice the actual voice of the Wendigo Colossus. Bethesda, if you're listening, John Cleese, Wendigo Colossus. You already have him working on stuff, or previously had him working on stuff for Elder Scrolls Online, so I'm sure you know his phone number. All right. Well, thank you, Lainey. This has been very, very cool. And also, thank you, chat, for being here. If you guys have any questions or thoughts about this, hang on. We'll be talking a little bit more about this after the end of the episode. And also, if you have questions about podcasting or anything else. Lainey, anything else going on you want to talk about before we head out?
Just streaming stuff, mostly.
Yeah? So what's going on with streaming lately?
Today we finished the Dark Brotherhood quest line.
Ooh,
we assassinated
in Skyrim or in Oblivion?
In Skyrim. In Oblivion.
I was gonna say.
For some reason, I thought you said in Fallout, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
No, Oblivion.
That did make sense. Yeah. No, it was in Skyrim. Yeah. Although I do want to stream Oblivion, and I can, so I will eventually.
I can and I will.
I can and I will. So we're doing that. I'm going to be playing around with Fallout 1 and 2 soon. So if anyone wants to see those, that's very exciting. And it'll be my first time with them too, and they're very different than the newer games. So that's going to be really cool. What else? We're playing through Prey, which is fun. It's another Bethesda game. We're playing through... There's some other Fallout here and there. I started Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I never played.
You're just like playing all the games.
I'm playing all the games. What else am I playing? Oh, I'm playing Dead Island, because we started it for like Spooky Month. So if you want some zombie games, we got that. We had something else too. Oh, Dark Souls.
Man.
Yes, 2 days ago, I defeated 2 bosses my first try.
Wow.
In one stream.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Which ones?
Yeah.
Which ones were they?
The butterfly one.
The butterfly one?
I can't remember their names. And then the gargoyles.
And the gargoyles are hard. They can be tough. Nice work. Nice work.
Very exciting. But I could not have done it without the help and tips and instruction of my incredible guest expert roommate, Corey.
Yeah. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Corey. But he's great. He really, like, when we do that stream, we do it together. You know, like, that is definitely, like, he is a guest on the stream. And it's really fun. Like, he's created his own kind of culture around it. People call him Dark Daddy. So he's his own thing now. It's so funny.
He's your Dark Daddy.
People come into my other streams and they're like, where is he?
Wow. All right.
So, you know.
You need to have a picture that you can just kind of put up on screen when he's not there and be like, here's Dark Daddy.
There he is. It's very funny. Yeah. Oh, also I have so my cats are named Sushi and Noodle. And on my Discord, which you can join if you want to, anyone's welcome, anyone and everyone. But also on my Twitch, now you can unlock them from subscribing. You can get Noodle Cat and Sushi Cat emotes where they're literally the foods turned into cats.
Oh man,
they're very cute.
Very cute.
Oh yeah, and Saber just dropped a Noodle Cat in chat.
Spam him in chat. If you got him, spam him.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome stuff. Well, it sounds like you're having a blast. We rated you today. So speaking of streaming, lovely. Yeah, I was playing Elder Scrolls Online with the community and walking on my treadmill, which I've been doing for the last week plus now. I'm doing almost 4 miles a day, almost 2 hours of walking.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and playing Elder Scrolls Online, and we did some questing and elsewhere, and then we ended up in doing some Dark Brotherhood stuff. We hunted down and assassinated a lady in one of the
That's so funny.
Bosmer villages. Yep.
It's like we both did Dark Brotherhood today.
Yeah. These are like not mainline quests too. This is a whole section in the game where there's a book and you can open up the book and it has descriptions of people who should be taken out, but it's not a main quest. It's like a bonus quest. And as you take them out, they're like red ghosts of them fill these pillars in the Dark Brotherhood cave or whatever the base is. Yeah, it was real good. So yeah, no, it's been good. We've been having a lot of fun. So come by the stream, either of our streams, and come hang out with us. We'd love to have you guys come on by. I'll be back tomorrow with the Fallout Hub at 5 p.m. on twitch.tv/the Fallout Hub. So come check that out as well. And I think that's pretty much it, Lainey.
Yeah, if anyone's interested, tomorrow we're doing Prey in the morning. It's our 3rd episode, so we're not super far into it. We can catch you up if you want to see it, and you can ride out the rest of the ride with us. Or what else we're doing? Oh, twice a week I explore indie games, and we're starting Undertale tomorrow.
Oh, cool. I heard that's really good.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to get in on Prey or Undertale, you can get in there.
There you go. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, for hanging out. It's good to see everybody as usual. And stay tuned if you are a patron or you're in chat. We'll be answering your questions after the end of the show. All right, guys. Talk to you next week. Until then, stay safe, don't eat other humans, and try not to turn into a Wendigo, because that's probably not a good idea. All right. See you later. To plug into everything else we're doing, check out robotsradio.net. Also, look up the Robots Radio YouTube for videos about Fallout and other things. And check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/robotsradio. This podcast was brought to you in part by our patrons at patreon.com/Fallout Lorecast, including our Tier 5 patrons, Firerider and Azen. Thank you so very much for your support.
Listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.